And we're back. You're listening to the Talkin Boxing with Billy C show. Glad you could join us. And I keep telling everybody we got a big announcement coming, and it's coming. It's going to be coming pretty soon, right after this segment, actually. So don't go anywhere, and I'll make sure I fill you in on all of that stuff. And while you're at that, why don't you check out our webpage, www.billycboxing.com. We're making some changes. There's some additions. There's some removals. So bang around the site and see what you think and let us know. And you could also follow us on Twitter. We'd appreciate that. It's at Talkin Boxing. That's TalkinBoxing. Well, it's that time again.
Blast from the past. We shine the spotlight again on fighters from years past.
Top-ranking Joe Louis is the leading contender.
Joe Frazier with a left hook. Good right hand thrown by Foreman that time. Look at that left hook.
Belt that goes to Ray Mancini.
It's Blast from the Past on Talkin Boxing.
And this week's Blast from the Past, which is being brought to us by KOFantasyBoxing.com. Check it out. Join today. www.KOFantasyBoxing.com features a very well-known fighter that I'm sure Alex Pierpaoli is going to fill us in. I'm sure you guys have all heard of him, and he'll just try to fill in the blanks for you. But former world light heavyweight champion George Nichols, and joining me right now is the man that knows everything about George Nichols, Alex Pierpaoli. What's up, Alex?
Good evening, Billy C. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. You sound very serious. You must have a lot to talk about, George Johnny Nichols. Tell us about this guy.
Very little.
Well, tell us.
This guy,
he's Italian.
Nichols, I didn't find much on him. Johnny Nichols, George Nichols, Philip Nichols. He's got a lot of names. Philip Michael Thomas.
Well, he was born Italian. He's Italian. Nicolosi was his original name.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. But unfortunately, I don't have much on him. He was a world champion, sort of. We'll get to that. But yes, George Nichols, light heavyweight, born July 10th, 1907. His alias was Johnny Nichols, and his birth name seems to have been Philip John Nicolosi. He was born in Sandusky, Ohio. However, even they seem to have some question about his multiple name changes. He was the son of Thomas and Ida Nichols, and they were able to track that down. So I guess I did find a page of Sandusky, Ohio history. He moved to Buffalo, and Buffalo, New York, and fought out of Buffalo. He was a southpaw, 5'10.5" tall. And like I said, light heavyweight. However, it seems that some of these fights, he was the opposite of Canelo, because he used to come in. In fact, the fight where he won the NBA light heavyweight championship in a tournament, he was 163, and his opponent was 173.5. But yes, as I said, like a southpaw. This was the period after Maxie Rosenblum, who we've done a blast on him, but I guess they had stripped him. The NBA, National Boxing Association, in '32 stripped him, felt he hadn't defended his title frequently enough, and they held a tournament in Chicago. 32 fighters, I guess, participated in the tournament, and it came down to Dave Mayer versus George Nichols on March 17th, 1932. March 18th, so the day after St. Patty's Day in Chicago. It must have been a big weekend. He was actually he was 24 years old at the time. He was long shot to win 100-1 in the betting, and he just plain outgamed Mayer, outslugged him at all times, and whenever he was stung by Mayer's heavy blasts, he fought back with such ferocity that he always turned the scales in his favor. That, according to the New York Times of March 19th, 1932. But yeah, that. So as I said, he was not a huge puncher, Bill, but a southpaw, and he seemed to pack some wallop for his size. And as I said, he was a little bit smaller than most light heavies.
Yeah, in the 20s, it wasn't too common to see southpaws. It really wasn't, and that was one advantage that he had. And he did fight some familiar names throughout his career: Jack McVeigh, Lou Scosa, Joe Knight, George Manley. Tony Tazzo was a big win in Buffalo. Not that he's a household name, but he was a tough fighter. Charlie Bellinger, and also John Henry Lewis he fought. And most of these guys he fought several times. The thing about that title, and you're right, 100-1 underdog, no one was giving this guy a chance. And talk about being a tough sanctioning body. He won that title in March, like you said, March 18th, 1932, and was stripped in December of the same year for failing to make a defense quick enough. Excuse me. 8 months was the limit, and he was stripped, never to get a shot at the title again. That seems a little strict, huh?
Yeah, that is pretty fast to strip a guy. Yeah, that as you mentioned, one of the things that was a little strange about that fight, that fight where he did win the championship against Dave Mayer, he was fighting another southpaw. So that was one of the things that they said that was, like you said, it was a rarity. It's rare for southpaws as it is, but that was an all southpaw light heavyweight championship bout. And you're right, Lou Scosa was the guy that they sort of expected to do really well in that tournament, but he did not. And they ended up facing each other. They had already fought once. So he was right up there, among the best in the division. Yeah, that Charlie Bellinger, he defeated him. Bellinger had been the Canadian light heavyweight champion. So he was, as many of our blasts from the past, this guy fought everybody.
Yeah, well, towards the end of his career, when he actually started losing a little more, Al Gaynor, he did lose. Like I said, he fought John Henry Lewis a couple of times. The Alabama Kid he lost to, and Fred Ospitali is one of his last pro fights in 1939. He got stopped by him. So he did fight these guys, and the weight differences back then, you could fight in a higher weight division. They didn't have a problem with someone weighing 160 and the opponent weighing 175 fighting for light heavyweight, because the idea was that you were moving up to challenge them. Now we have safety concerns, but that's why you see a lot of guys. Even look at Stanley Ketchel fighting. He fought light heavy and heavyweight even, against Johnson, so I mean, and he was a middleweight, so it was, they looked at it definitely differently back then.
True.
And another thing that
sometimes you did see fights where they would call, there was no super middleweight, so you would see sometimes two guys, 165, 166 pounds, 164 pounds, and they're considered light heavies.
Yeah, because they only had the 8 weight classes. This guy was referred to as a tough as nails journeyman. Back in even when he was campaigning and was involved in that light heavyweight tournament. So he was looked upon as that. And to me, he represents the same stuff we talk about. A typical fighter, a tradesman. He was part of the boxing trade. This was a guy that spent 18 years in the business, and although I don't know what he did afterwards, I couldn't find out anything which he did. But another interesting little tidbit was that one of his managers was none other than Doc Kearns, which was pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's for a period he was managed by him. Yeah, Jack Singer as well. He did have, in terms of Buffalo history, at the time that he became the champion, Buffalo had, in terms of, sports, they were making a name for themselves because at least in boxing terms, because Tommy Paul was already holding the featherweight championship. So for a period there, the city of Buffalo had the presence of two reigning boxing champions, which is kind of cool. It's better than the Buffalo Bills, I think, too. Isn't it?
Well, they had four chances at it and came up short. But I know you like to go to Cyber Boxing Zone for information, and I don't know if you caught another little tidbit about George Nichols. Apparently, he married Catherine Klein. Yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Now, Kit Klein, her name was Catherine Klein. She was a national women's speed skating champion, also from Buffalo. Now, they must have been close. They must have been friends. I don't know if they dated. Perhaps they did. According to Cyber Boxing Zone, they actually sparred together in a boxing ring as a kind of joke, they mentioned. And then later, after a party, and this must have been some party, Kit Klein and George Nichols went off and got married.
Those crazy kids, those crazy kids.
Yeah. They were both athletes, I guess. There is the whole thing became a news story because a couple of months later, or I guess a couple of years later, in 35, she got engaged to an orthopedic doctor, Thomas Outland. And I guess when news of this broke, Walter Winchell, who was the famous radio announcer, that was the TMZ of the day, found out that, wait a minute, Miss Kit Klein, supposedly she's already married. And I guess it took her a couple of days, but she did announce that, yes, she married the boxer whose real name out of the ring was Philip J. Nichols. This is according to the New York Times, April 3rd, 1935. She revealed that the marriage came after this is her speaking, quote, the whole affair was considered more or less a joke by both George and me. The ceremony was performed after a party, and they never actually lived together. She said that they would both talk to an attorney at the time about an annulment. So that marriage, they got married in 33. So this was 35 when the story about broke. Like I said, must have been quite a party. And back then, even today, bigamy is illegal. So of course she had to get the annulment in order to go ahead and marry the orthopedic surgeon.
And they say the young people today are crazy. Yeah, come on.
Yeah,
man.
You see that?
Yeah, they had nothing on them in the late 20s and early 30s, right? But anyway, I couldn't find what became of George Nichols after his last fight in 1939 in his birthplace of Sandusky, Ohio. Can you enlighten us on anything? Or
I do not have anything, unfortunately, and just in my own defense, I did want to talk to you about something that maybe I don't have access to one of the better search engines that I used to, and I wanted to talk to you about that. Maybe there's a way we could work on that. That maybe I could have found something, but I don't feel too bad because I did find this little thing that was for the Buffalo Veterans Boxers Association. This was, I guess, their banquet. I guess in 89, I guess, or no, maybe this was 97. They did talk about him, and they said the records are spotty, but Nichols apparently suffered a knee injury, lost several non-title fights, and was not okay. Wait a minute, that was way back.
No, he was one of the first inductees in their Buffalo's Hall of Fame in 1997.
Oh, okay, so that's what this must have been part of their program or something. They said he continued to fight until 39. His whereabouts are unknown. If alive, he turned 88 last July. See, they have his birthday actually July 9th, not July 10th. But yeah, so don't really know what he ended up doing afterwards.
I have a couple of sources that say he died at 79 years old in September of 1996, but no exact date. You know, this was the problem when everybody went by all these aliases and different names, and really, you know, they changed it. I mean, for everyone watching and listening, you know, that's one of the reasons federal IDs came into play in boxing, because fighters would literally, you know, say they're Joe Smith, and the following week go tell somebody their name was, you know, Jack Jones, and they would fight again, you know, and they didn't care. So it was tough. I would have thought that he would have did something that we could have traced, but I couldn't, and obviously if you couldn't, then let's move on. Who did you put him up against in the title bout championship computer game?
Well, that's poor George doesn't fare much better than he did in life, unfortunately, because he comes around when we have quite two monstrous light heavyweights right now. So I put him up against Kovalev and Stevenson. The only reason I put him against, even though Kovalev is ranked number 1 by Billy C boxing rankings, I still think you got to put Stevenson in there just because he is the lineal champion. So versus Kovalev, this is very interesting because wait till you hear these results. They're almost identical. Okay, so versus Kovalev, I had them fight the first time. George wins a unanimous decision. Here's the scores: 114 to 112 all around. Each judge had the same score. In the fifth, Kovalev dropped Nichols in the fourth. Nichols comes back to drop Kovalev in the fifth. When they fight 100 times, Kovalev does get the better of Nichols. Nichols ends up with a record of 42 wins, 52 defeats, 6 draws, 32 KOs of his 42 wins. So when he won, he was usually knocking Kovalev out, which I thought was impressive. And Kovalev usually outpointed him. Of his 52 victories, only 17 were knockouts, which I thought was one of the more interesting things of that. Now, when Stevenson and Nichols fight the first time, guess what the scores are? 114, 112, all around in favor of Nichols. And again, Nichols drops Stevenson in the fifth, and then Stevenson drops Nichols in the sixth. So they traded knockdowns and come up with a unanimous score of 114-112, just like versus Kovalev, which I thought was kind of interesting. When they fight 100 times, Stevenson gets the better of Nichols. Nichols' record ends up being 33 wins, 65 defeats, 2 draws. He only scored 17 knockouts in his 33 wins, and in Stevenson's 65 victories, he scores 53 by knockout. So he does a little better against Nichols. And Stevenson is a southpaw, isn't he? Or am I completely blanking on that?
Adonis Stevenson, I've lost all respect for him. So, but anyway, George Nichols, yeah, he is.
Yeah,
George,
he is a southpaw.
Yeah.
So that's so I think that's sort of interesting because the southpaw does a little better against the southpaw than the orthodox guy.
George Nichols, former world light heavyweight champion, had a career record of 82 wins, 33 coming by knockout. He suffered 32 losses in which he was stopped 12 times. He had 11 draws. Now, he also fought in the newspaper decision era, in which he picked up 12 more wins and only 2 losses. His total career, 140 fights, going 923 rounds with approximately a 25% knockout ratio. George Nichols, our blast from the past this week, and despite not having that much information, a great job
still got
as
20 minutes. I can't believe it.
Great job as usual, Alex Pierpaoli. Alex, before we let you go, I wanted to ask you your thoughts real quick about a couple of the fights this past weekend. First and foremost, Luis Ortiz knocks out Tony Thompson. That wasn't anything that's shocking. Was there anything you saw in Ortiz's win that impresses you or doesn't impress you?
I enjoyed it. I did not get to watch all the fights this weekend, but I did watch the HBO card, and I did think that was pretty entertaining. I did not get to watch all the bull crap in between, but I watched both of the fights.
Yeah, that's the beauty. That's the beauty of DVR, man. I mean, exactly, I can't stand it. I can't remember the last time I've had to put myself through all the BS. You know, I love it, but I'm looking at Ortiz and I'm seeing and going back, I know you called one of his fights with me, and I see a different Ortiz. I think this kid has changed since the Bryant Jennings win. I think he's fighting like he knows he's something. He's not lackadaisical. He seems like he's got a little bounce in his step, and I think he is going to be a dangerous opponent for the other champions.
Oh, absolutely. And I think I would also go as far as to say that he is the class of the division, even though Tyson Fury is the biggest and has the win over Klitschko. I do think that Ortiz is the best fighter, and I really enjoyed watching him work. Tony Thompson, he gave a good account of himself, but you knew he was going to get knocked out the way he went down from that first knockdown. It was amazing. The posture was almost the same posture that Mosley was left in when he was dropped against Manny Pacquiao. It almost looked like a man half getting up out of a chaise lounge. It was strange, and there was this look on his face like, oh boy, this is going to be a long night.
I think I'm positive that this guy's goal, Thompson, was to go 6 rounds. That's half of it. And once he made it past that 5th, I knew that he wasn't getting out of that 6th. And when he went down that last time, he said to himself, why bother getting up? I just got another, 6-figure payday, So that was the end of that.
Yeah, and as if we have anything to remember from his post-fight interviews with the David Price fights, the only person he feels sorry for is Mrs. Tony Thompson.
Right. That's true. The other fight...
I thought the Jesse Vargas-Saddam Ali fight was great.
That's what I was
thoroughly enjoyed that. It was, not that it was like fight of the year great, but it was very dramatic. It was very enjoyable. It was nice to see Jesse Vargas come up with that big win, and it really was one of those fights that it got to the end of it, and I was like, when did Saddam Ali's left eye get all so swollen? But it was one of those fights where Jesse Vargas really stayed right in front of him, and I think I disagree a little bit with what you and Larry were saying, because I thought Saddam Ali could have tried to win that fight a little better, but it would have been an uglier fight. He could have stunk it out and maybe moved a little more. But by standing right in front of him, he left himself open for that same right hand that drilled Timothy Bradley. I wouldn't mind seeing a rematch of that fight. I did enjoy it. And kudos to Jesse Vargas because he deserved a big win.
Jesse Vargas, I think what was so... First of all, I keep saying this. Saddam Ali did not have the right road trip to that fight. He just didn't get enough experience against the right opponents, number one. Number two, he's got an awful trainer in his corner. And I think that the game plan, if they had one, was, it's got to be mouth-watering to a fighter that's got hand speed and punching accuracy, which Saddam Ali does have, when they see a fighter like Jesse Vargas, who really doesn't have the hand speed and fights virtually with no defensive posture. His hands are down, and he's become... And for Jesse Vargas, who I like, I think what he's got to watch out for is that he doesn't become that headhunter, that one-punch knockout guy that's going to take the shots and then hope that he's going to catch up. The fight against Bradley might have started him feeling that way, and that's what I saw against Saddam Ali. Was it exciting? Yeah, and I'm glad for Jesse, but I hope he goes back to the drawing board and says, hey, I got to tighten up my game. I don't want to be in these kinds of fights forever because his career won't last long.
Yeah, that's true. That you have to take that much punishment to get there. That's a good point. Yeah. I also did watch the Lucas Brown Ruslan Chagayev fight, and I did. I thought it was what it was.
It wasn't exciting. It wasn't exciting.
No, but it was. I thought that one of the things I really enjoyed about, and I wish more American broadcasts would have noticed this, is Shagayev's wife's reaction to having a camera stuck in her face to get her reaction of seeing her husband knocked out. That is the exact reason why I was so glad that she had that raw emotion and waved her hand as if to say, "Get out of my face."
Yeah.
I'm so waiting for some of these American spouses to do that when all Showtime and HBO have to do that. And I'm sorry, but this is a sport where something atrocious could happen. We are seeing what's happening to the fighter. We don't need to see. It doesn't enhance the broadcast for me in any way to see the pain on the family's face. I don't understand why we've gotten into that tradition, and I object to it. Sometimes it's nice to see people celebrating, but we don't have to also see and I remember one fight, Jim Lampley kept reporting to us, if it was Tim Bradley or somebody, his wife has left the room. Now they've come back. His son has left the room, and now he's come back. It's like, why do we care?
Because it's
this sort of reality TV aspect.
That's exactly what I was just going to say. You just took the word. We've become a reality TV type audience. People want to see things happen, and they want to see it real. And I'm with you. I don't think we need to see it, but apparently the producers and the networks feel it's important to capture that on film. I mean, it's one thing if you're there and you see it, and you're a writer and you write about it. Of course, you definitely are. It's interesting to hear about. But the idea, it's a whole different aspect to stick a camera in the person's face when they're watching a loved one getting battered in the head. I just don't see why we need to see their reaction. I hear you. Alex, great job as usual, and reach out to me about that issue, and we'll see what we can do.
All right, sounds good, Billy C. Take care.
All right, man. That's Alex Pierpaoli. Another great job on our blast from the past. I've been teasing you guys for a while, and I will give you my announcement about what's happening in about 2.
Talkin Boxing with